We'd like to start. If Kayla will call the roll.
Thank you, Linda Diane. I have received regrets from the following transportation commissioners who are not able to join us this evening: Commissioner Margolis, Commissioner Dolan, and Commissioner Woods. Also, I wanted to note that, as I announced at last month's meeting, Commissioner Tim Sanderson is no longer with AATA. So Tim was previously serving as the delegate for the CEO, Matt Carpenter, and it's my understanding that Matt Carpenter will represent the AATA until the AATA board nominates a different delegate or representative. So I will now call the roll. Please say here when your name is called. Commissioner Boland,
Here.
Commissioner Felt,
Here.
Councilmember Griswold,
Here.
Commissioner Hull,
Here.
Commissioner Kleinman,
Here.
Commissioner Lernahan,
Here.
Commissioner Parsons, Commissioner Carpenter, Commissioner Summers,
Yeah.
Sergeant Bill Clock,
Here.
Commissioner Hess,
Here.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Here.
Commissioner Webb. We have a quorum.
Great. I'm going to pull the agenda from the consent agenda. So we'll start just by voting on the minutes. And I'm pulling it just because we have a change to the agenda. So a motion to approve the consent agenda.
To approve the minutes.
Okay. And, pardon me?
You said to approve the consent agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. You do want to, you're good. You
Seconded
confused me by
by-
pulling the agenda off the consent.
Right.
Boland, second.
Okay. Any, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we have minutes. The agenda item is just that we're going to pull the approval of public for the 7th Street Committee, because we don't have any applications at this time. So otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
So moved.
Okay, seconded by,
I second.
great. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and now we have an agenda and time for public comment. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Clark Charnetsky, and there are 4 items I'd like to mention today, so I'm going to go kind of quickly. First of all, I believe on your agenda you have a discussion of the crosswalk ordinance, and there's a draft statement from this committee, and I endorse that. I won't go into all the details. You know my feelings on that. Ann Arbor does have a lot of pedestrians, not just in the campus and downtown area. I live on Nixon Road with Clague School, and we have a lot of pedestrians there with Parkway Meadows especially. Also, I noticed in your street work that one of the items that'll have some work done on it this coming season is Plymouth Road from Nixon to Murphin. That's long overdue, and I'm glad to see something happening there. I wish you'd also turn your attention to the part just in toward the city from that, between the 2 Broadway intersections around Barton Drive. That needs at least some good work, not just throwing some blacktop on in a hole, but a little more extensive work, but not a lot. Also, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there is a proposal for combined effort by the RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority, and Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. It's called D2 to A2. It's an express commuter bus service. It would operate almost hourly on weekdays from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. and reduced hours on weekends. And this maybe is something that could be a future topic. Also, understand that Linda's your last time as chair, according to your notes online. And just want to thank you for all the work you've done, a brand-new committee getting it going, and it's really appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? All right, then public comment is closed, and we'll move on to business. So the annual report, Caleb?
So our first agenda item, and this was if you printed the agenda prior to today, then you saw that business was first. I did swap it to be information discussion first, so we could have our staff presentation and then let them take off.
Okay.
So that's on the latest agenda that was posted
Great,
today.
and we'll do that.
So that's what you approved. Thank you. So we would welcome Dave Dykman to present about the 2020 street resurfacing improvements.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Dave Dykman. I'm one of the city's civil engineers and project managers. Work in the engineering department. I oversee and manage the city's street resurfacing program, as well as the capital preventive maintenance program. I'm here tonight to talk about some of the proposed street resurfacing improvements that are scheduled for this coming construction season. I don't believe you all received a copy of my presentation in advance, so I do apologize for that. I believe we will be making copies available to you after tonight's meeting.
It is now posted in Legistar.
So these first few slides, if you are new to the commission, you won't recognize them, but I have presented these in the past. Some very detailed information about the background and overview of resurfacing as it applies to the projects that we are involved in here at the city. The goal and objective of the program is to return the condition of pavements to a good or very good condition. In addition, we look to enhance the functionality and safety for both non-motorized and motorized users that are using these streets and roadways throughout the city. Typically, these improvements involve a planning process that's utilizing our pavement asset management data that's collected on it was a 3-year basis. I believe we're moving to a 2-year basis now. And then we program and fund the construction of these improvements through the capital improvement plan process. That applies to not just the major streets, but to the local streets as well. These improvements involve both non-structural or preservation type activities and structural or restorative and rehabilitation type activities as well. They usually are contained in the existing footprint of the roadway. They involve very little, if any, geometric changes to the roadway. They are very often less complex and don't involve a lot of detailed design, and therefore they don't require a lot of survey data collection to implement. They also very infrequently require any additional right-of-way or easements. In terms of the selection of the candidates, they're usually included in several types of projects that the city does annually. They could be a part of the annual street resurfacing project. We have a capital preventive maintenance or surface treatment project that we bid out annually, and they also could be standalone projects. The projects that I'm going to speak about tonight comprise any number of those. In terms of the considerations or opportunities that are examined during the planning process, we often look at the methods that are required to either rehabilitate or restore the pavement condition or preserve its current condition. These methods are looked at in order to determine how we can best extend the surface life of the street. We also look at the feasibility to incorporate improvements that have been identified in the city's non-motorized plan. We also look to incorporate stormwater management improvements and other drainage improvements, achieve compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and also looked at the feasibility and necessity to improve safety along these project corridors. In terms of the type of methods that we look at related to preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, preservation, like I mentioned previously, is a non-structural type treatment. So they usually involve surface seals such as microsurfacing or cape seals. We've done a number of these projects in the last several years. They could also involve a thin overlay of the existing pavement or a mill and fill, so removing a thin section of the existing pavement and replacing it. Some projects may involve just some minimal pavement repairs and then either placing a surface seal, a thin overlay, or a mill and fill. Restoration are generally structural type improvements, so there are definitely more significant repairs involved. Oftentimes, we have to go deeper in the pavement section to bring that pavement up to a good condition or a very good condition. So it's usually involving a thicker overlay or placement of new pavement. Some projects, and I'll speak to about a couple tonight, just involve a partial depth repavement removal where we're just taking out the upper portion of the pavement and replacing it. In terms of rehabilitation, this is a more robust type of treatment. It typically involves a full depth removal of the pavement surface and then repairing the base and then putting that pavement back. In some instances, we may elect to pulverize or crush that existing pavement and replace it, or put it back as the base and then pave over top of it. In terms of the non-motorized transportation improvements that we focus on, that are identified in the non-motorized transportation plan, they often involve the addition of bike lanes, the narrowing of traffic lanes, the reconfiguration of lanes, which possibly could include the elimination of parking or converting street corridors from 4 to 3 lanes or 3 to 2 lanes or even 5 to 3 lanes. It just depends on the nature of the improvement. The addition of mid-block crossings, and then the addition of sidewalks or asphalt paths, which are generally that type of work is included in a separate project. It just really depends on the complexity of it, but there are instances where there may be a sidewalk or asphalt path gap within a project corridor that can be easily addressed as a part of a resurfacing project. In terms of typical drainage and stormwater improvements, those often involve replacement of curb and gutter, replacement of the stormwater curb inlets, which have a tendency to get clogged. The older type of structures have a tendency to get clogged and are difficult to maintain. Sometimes we change the pavement cross slope to improve the surface water runoff, and getting to that curve and into the storm system. Sometimes there's opportunities to do some stormwater management, which involves the addition of infiltration basins or oversized stormwater pipes, or even drainage control structures to limit the amount of stormwater runoff that runs into the storm system. In terms of the ADA improvements, we're often looking to remove and replace concrete sidewalks and ramps to bring them in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We could be adding smaller missing segments of concrete sidewalk or ramps to close gaps or improve street crossings. And we also typically do sidewalk repairs and sidewalk ramp repairs along the street corridors. Safety improvements include, shortening of crosswalks. Usually we build curb bump outs at the intersections or mid-block crossings to shorten the length of the street crossing. We also use enhanced pavement markings or traffic signage to provide better visibility and guidance for users. In terms of the projects I'm going to speak about tonight, there's 6 of them currently listed here. These all involve proposed non-motorized improvements that either have or have not been identified in the non-motorized plan. I believe in some of these there was nothing identified, but there are proposed improvements that we're considering. So, as I mentioned before, some of these projects are included in the street resurfacing annual project, those being Boardwalk, Granger, the shared youth path, and the shared use path work proposed on South Main Street and West Oakbrook Drive. The Plymouth Road project is a standalone project. It's receiving federal funding from the state of Michigan and the federal government. That will be bid and administered through the Michigan Department of Transportation. And then the East Stadium Boulevard project is part of our annual street surface project. In terms of Plymouth Road, this is what we're considering this project as a restoration type project in nature, so it's going to involve removing the upper portion, roughly 2.5 inches of the existing asphalt pavement, and replacing it. There's some minor curb work and concrete work involved along the corridor, as well as some driveway opening replacements. Bringing non-compliant ramps into compliance. There's several located along that corridor that need to be replaced. And again, placing new pavement markings and signing and restoring areas disturbed by construction. Couple major reconstructive components to this project involve the reconstruction of the mid-block pedestrian islands located along that corridor. So this project runs from Murphin Ave to Nixon Road, and there's presently 3 mid-block crossings in that corridor, and those islands will be replaced as a part of this work. Moving on to the next project, that is Boardwalk Drive, which extends from Eisenhower Parkway northerly to the end, where it then opens up to the driveways for the Ann Arbor Public Schools bus services facility. This project is what we're considering to be more rehabilitative in nature, so we'll be removing the entirety of the asphalt pavement along the corridor, replacing drainage inlets that currently are substandard, also replacing segments of curb, driveway approaches, and non-compliant sidewalk ramps. We're also looking at the extension of the sidewalk that runs from Eisenhower Parkway north and then stops, I think, after the second parcel on the east side. So we're planning to extend that sidewalk along the east side up to Oakbrook Drive to provide better access for those users along the corridor, particularly users that utilize the daycare and the church located along the east side of the roadway there. Other project components include placement of new pavement markings, again signing, and then restoration of any areas that are disturbed during construction. Moving on to the next project is Granger Ave, and this extends between South State Street and Packard Street. This is, again, is a rehabilitative project in nature, so it's going to involve removing all the asphalt pavement, and there's a concrete base underlying that pavement that's going to be removed and replaced. Inlets, curb and gutter, driveway approaches, same as most of the other projects. Non-compliant ADA sidewalk ramps will be introduced. A couple of the options that are being considered along this corridor are the addition of advisory bike lanes, the relocation of parking to the south side of the street only, and then curb bump outs or or new or modified crosswalks at the minor street intersections located along the corridor. This next slide depicts what the corridor would look like. It shows it before and after street configuration. As I mentioned, the non-motorized or safety improvements would include the addition of the advisory bike lanes in both directions along the corridor and the parking along the south side. What's not depicted is the bump outs at the major intersection, at the intermediate intersections along the corridor. Those would be just located on the south side of the street. Those would shorten the crossings, and we would actually add, I think there's 3 new proposed mid-block crossings or crossings at those intersections that would be introduced as a part of that work. Moving on to the next project. The next 2 are actually asphalt path projects. We're looking to restore and/or rehabilitate these paths. The first being the asphalt paths located along both sides of the street on South Main Street between Eisenhower Parkway and Ann Arbor Saline Road. These would involve the full depth removal and patching in areas of deteriorated pavement along both sides of the road to improve the condition of those paths. There is some sidewalk and ramp work also needed along these paths. And then we'd be placing a new asphalt overlay over the entire length of both sides of the paths along both sides of the street. And then restoring the edges of these paths where they're disturbed by the construction. The Oak Brook path is similar to that proposed, the work similar to that proposed on South Main Street. I mean, a little bit more involved, because they're looking at the likelihood, due to the condition of that path, of having to crush and shape or pulverize that path. We put that material back down as a base. We may add some additional gravel on top of that to create an improved base along there. And then we would pave over top of that with a new 3-inch pavement section of asphalt. Again, there are concrete sidewalk and ramp work, removing and replacement items that would be addressed. And then restoration along both sides of the path. And this would involve, there's essentially 2 paths along Oak Brook, 1 on each side of the street, so we'd be addressing both of those paths. The last project is East Stadium Boulevard that runs between South Industrial Highway and Packard Street. This is what we are considering a preservation type treatment. So the existing condition of the pavement is what we consider to be fair. So we'll be going in and patching and joint and crack filling areas of the deteriorated pavement to repair those. And we'll be placing what we call a cape seal. And we've done this, as I mentioned, on several streets throughout the city. Most recently, we did Packard Street between Platt and US 23. That was one of the jobs that we just completed this past construction season. So that cape seal involves placing a chip seal, which is typically used on a lot of county rural roads, and then we place a microsurfacing treatment over top of it to create a smoother driving and riding surface. We'll be adding new pavement markings and installing new traffic signs and replacing those that are substandard or in need of replacement. The proposed configuration of the street, we would be adding bike lanes along both sides in each direction. So that will require that we narrow the traffic lanes. Right now, the traffic lanes are roughly 11.5 feet wide. We'll be narrowing them to 10 feet wide and placing these new 5-foot wide bike lanes along both the westbound and eastbound directions on this corridor. In terms of next steps through the coming months, we'll be finalizing the designs for each of these projects. These are just some of the work that we'll be undertaking this construction season. I think there's probably 15 major streets that we'll be entertaining work on this season, and likely adding more streets to that list. And then we've got, right now, there's probably upwards of 70 local streets that we'll be addressing this construction season. So we'll be finalizing the plans this later this month and into February, preparing final specs and cost estimates early to mid-February, and then preparing a final bid package for advertisement in late February. Anticipate that we'll have project bid lettings in March. The preservation treatment project probably won't bid until sometime in April, and then construction will take place beginning in early May through probably late October, even into potentially into November. So, with that, are there any questions? I know I threw a lot of information at you.
Kathy?
Some of these included mid-block crosswalks that you're adding, and are you coordinating to get street lighting put in, positive contrast lighting at all of those
Yes,
crosswalks
so-
at the same time?
One thing I didn't mention is the process involved in the planning and design of this project involves coordination and involvement with the city's transportation staff, both the planning and engineers in that group. And we are working with our streetlight group to entertain and introduce street lighting as needed along these mid-block, these mid-block crossings where it's warranted.
Julie?
Okay.
I'll
Hi.
start over here.
Thanks very much for this presentation. It was
No
really
problem.
interesting. I'm wondering about how streets get prioritized and scheduled for repair, and it feels a little bit unpredictable to me, and I just wonder if you can fill in some of the, resolve some of the mystery. Like, for example, are there particular goals, like for major streets to get resurfaced every so many years and local streets so many years, or how do you get things on the schedule and decide what's a priority?
That's a challenge. I mean, for the major street side, it's primarily done through the CIP planning process. On the local streets, we've changed things here recently. We've set up 8 different areas throughout the city as focus areas and identified the percentage of streets in those areas that are essentially in the worst condition. So we're looking at ratings. We use a PACER rating scale that ranges from 10 down to 1, with 10 being streets that are in excellent condition, and 1 being those that are considered in very poor or failed condition. So in each of those areas throughout the city, we've identified the streets that are classified from a rating of 1 through 4. And we've compiled the number of lane miles of each of those streets. And we're using, basically, we're looking at areas that have the most streets in the worst condition, and we're addressing those areas first. And we're kind of picking them off as we go. So next year, this current year, we're going to be focusing on the southwest part of the city, so the area, I guess, bordered by Scioto Church, north and south of Scioto Church, and then from between Maple Road and essentially 7th Street or Greenview, kind of in that vicinity, going up to Stadium Boulevard. In 2021, we're focusing more on and 22 more on the southeast part of the city. These areas don't necessarily coincide with the council wards, but they kind of replicate them, but there's some overlap there, so I'd be happy to share the map. We're just starting to develop this, and we'd be happy to share the map if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. Is that publicly available too? Like, can the public
At
get
this
that
point, no,
information?
it's not.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yes.
Yeah, so thank you. This was really helpful. I have a couple of questions. I noticed that for Granger, there's going to be a couple of public input sessions around the design of the street.
We had our initial meeting back in November, and now we have a follow-up meeting tomorrow night.
Right. So I guess my question was, are there plans for similar sessions for some of these other
So we will,
projects?
for the local street work that we're proposing, we'll be having a meeting sometime later this winter. Actually, we have a meeting next week to talk about scheduling.
Okay.
We'll be holding public meetings. Usually, the local street meeting is what we consider a neighborhood meeting. Likelihood of that occurring is probably going to be sometime in March.
Okay.
And then we'll have an open house that speaks to all of our major street improvement projects sometime probably in March or early April at the same time.
Great. And then my other question was about along South Main, the path resurfacing that you're going to be doing?
Yes.
Is there going to be anything done to improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists at driveways along that stretch of path? So it's one of the big conflict points for when there's a nice path like that, people bike on it, but then when there's driveways, there's often issues of cars trying to pull all the way out to the road and not looking for bikes or pedestrians, and there are various ways to improve those interactions, and I was just wondering if the city's looking at any of that.
We will be working with our transportation staff and looking at ways where we can improve those. Certainly researching our crash data to see if there is a history out there where, where there's locations that, certainly warrant some type of treatment.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to focus in on Granger again real quick.
Sure.
And not necessarily a question for you, maybe, others can chime in, but I believe that section is currently proposed for traffic calming possibilities, and now seems like a perfect opportunity to get everyone involved and try to figure out this corridor. I know that the parking, there was a pilot test there to try to figure out how chicanes would work. But as it's going in right now, it's going to be a straight shot with advisory bike lanes and parking on one side. that feels like we're possibly moving backwards in design. So I just want to make sure that we're robust and trying to figure out how to fix this corridor for pedestrian and bicycle users as well as automobiles and the neighborhood. So I don't know. Maybe you could comment where you're at, and others might be able to chime in.
Well, I know that we are definitely aware that there was this application submitted for traffic calming along that corridor. We've tried to, the intent is to separate this project work with that. We don't feel like what we are planning to do is going to necessarily impede any future traffic calming improvements that could potentially happen along the corridor. I believe, I don't know if you know, Kayla, I think it's a 2021 timeframe that we're looking at for the traffic calming. There are several other projects that in front of this one in the queue.
Yeah, so I did look at the list of submitted projects and ones that have kind of been received and are currently being reviewed. And Granger from State to Packard is one segment, and then Granger from South Forest to Olivia is the other segment that have both petitioned for traffic calming. Mr. Dykeman's right, they are kind of at the bottom of the queue, and there are 2, 4, 6 projects in advance of that. So that process would probably kick off at the earliest next year, and maybe even later than that, depending upon how many projects we get through. It is, just to piggyback off of a response that Dave gave, that oftentimes there are kind of these overlap between things like traffic calming and the resurfacing and what have you. And, I think with traffic calming in particular, there is kind of an opportunity to move forward with the resurfacing and like you said, not impact it. Because we didn't want to hold up the resurfacing. And as you know, sometimes the traffic calming petitions don't advance. And so, it's just kind of, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Yeah, we want to maximize effort. We want to maximize the engagement with the community. But at the same time, we also don't want to, we don't want one process to kind of be held hostage to the other. And so I think that's why moving forward with the resurfacing is kind of the game plan. And then we'll still obviously advance the traffic calming petition and take that through that process accordingly.
Okay?
I just have one comment, which is I'm thrilled to hear about the bike lane going in on East Stadium. It's a confusing thing to ride from, say, 7th Street to Packard right now, where it's bike lane, no bike lane, no, it's on and off and on and off. And I assume that you're also building in a nice transition through the intersection of industrial.
Yes, we're currently working on the design of that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Stand here, so.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And are you going to follow up with the map then?
We will be, I will talk to, should I talk to you, Kayla, about that? I'll talk
Okay.
to Kayla about that
And obviously,
and other staff.
if you do present it, if you do let us see it, then it becomes public, so.
And we will be, in the near future, also posting a map online on the road construction, or project construction construction webpage, with a list of all the planned street surface treatment, or basically any street work that's planned for the coming construction season. So that will probably be available, I would think, in the coming month.
Great.
So.
All right. So are we up to the annual report now? Okay, so the only change in the annual report is that we included what happened last December. So I don't know if there are any other comments or concerns about that. We could just take a motion to approve the annual report. Okay, seconded by Molly. No discussion. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Abstentions? All right, then we have an annual report. And the next item is? Great. So we have a actual proposal in your packet, written by Molly.
When you try to pull it
Based on
up-
what we asked her to do. So how does that reflect your concerns and what you wanted to have included from the last meeting?
I have a question. So just strategically, there's sort of a list of what we require, but there's no rationale. Would it be stronger if there was a rationale, or would short and sweet is best? I'm just curious what people think about that.
Or do we consider the rationale in previous comments or motions as well?
Yeah, I was wondering, so there are footnotes. I didn't follow up on that to see if the rationale was in the,
It's not in the footnotes. And yeah, I went for short and sweet in putting this together and just tried to focus really on things we had talked about as a commission, so I was trying not to impose anything on this. I think if we do want to include rationale for some of it, that might make sense if we think of this as serving as a sort of educational document to some extent, like this is what we recommend and this is why. But it's certainly, I think, been captured in a lot of other places.
yeah.
So I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other about it.
It's also possible to pass this and provide the rationale as a secondary step.
yeah.
Just,
Kathy?
oh, go ahead. Oh, it's just a minor edit thing, potentially edit, I'm not sure. It's the second bullet point underneath recommendations. Or the bill includes the curb in its definition of the crosswalk. I think curb ramp was
Oh, yeah,
originally how we,
yes,
so I just wanted to,
yep.
okay, cool.
It's a friendly amendment.
You got that,
Curb
Kayla?
ramp.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's actually curb ramp, or curb line, I believe. There are three elements there.
Okay.
I just want to say that the language that was presented in the bill is what MDOT would allow to be introduced, but once it gets to committee, then all of these recommendations can be considered, and there'll be probably lively debate in committee if it's anything like the 3-foot passing bill that was passed for cyclists.
And that bill probably has not been reintroduced in this session
The crosswalk bill, or?
at the state level?
The crosswalk bill? No, it hasn't, and the reason is that until certain budget disagreements are resolved, the Democrats cannot introduce any bills. Or most bills cannot be introduced because they would have to give up something to the Republicans in order to get a bill introduced, and so they don't want to. Although I read today that major progress was made, and so I'm assuming that the budget issues will be resolved in the next few days.
Other discussion about this? It contains what I was hoping it would contain.
Great.
So I'll entertain a motion to, let's see, Kayla gave me some language here. To accept the statewide crosswalk law recommendations and forward said recommendations to city council.
Sounds good.
A motion?
So moved.
Okay, seconded by,
Boland.
okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Kathy Griswold abstained. Then it has passed. Thank you. All right, we're whipping along here. We go to, we're already at transportation project updates, is that?
We're at chair and vice chair election.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'm wondering,
Let's
what
not skip
happened
that.
to the Seventh Street process community appointments?
I didn't get a response back
Oh,
from
okay.
reaching out twice. So I assume that will still happen, and we'll bring it to the next meeting, but the group will probably start meeting without formal representation. But we've had this situation before where community members have been part of the group and then been appointed later. So we're definitely moving forward with the committee, but not with any elected representatives at this point from the public. Okay?
Okay.
All right, then. We are up for voting in a new chair and vice chair. My term is limited, so after 3 years, I'm happy to pass that on. So I need a nomination for a chair and vice chair, which could be joined or not. I think Brad has,
I'm pushing my button. I would like to put forward Councilmember Kleinman as chair and Julie Boland, Councilmember Boland as vice chair, if she's willing.
We're commissioners, not.
Or commissioners, sorry. Molly and Julie, I'd like that better. Anyway.
okay. And that's acceptable to both of you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, then we will still vote on this. And so the recommendation, or the motion is to have Molly be the chair and Julie be the vice chair. Is there a second? Kathy Griswold, seconded. And if there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and Molly and I talked beforehand, I'm going to continue to chair the meeting until the end today, and then she will be fully responsible in February.
Thank you.
Great. All right, then. And now I believe we're at the transportation project updates.
Indeed. All right, so before I begin, Madam Chair, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that you may have noticed that the format of the report did change. We have condensed it to really just focus on the changes from last month to this month. So we're still kind of muddling through this a little bit. I suspect further changes to future reports may occur. But ultimately, everything that you have in your report is pretty much new language, and that's kind of what we want to focus on from here on out. You may recall when we discussed this in the past, there's a new reporting requirement for staff to City Council on a quarterly basis, and so one of the things that we talked about was to sort of streamline what we report to you and what we report to them, just highlighting kind of those changes on a month-to-month basis that can then be rolled into a quarterly report. So this is the first attempt at it. Again, it might change a little bit, either in format or style, but ultimately we want to make sure that we're capturing the changes that are occurring. So I'll quickly go through those, so it'll probably be a little bit easier to follow along because I won't be jumping around. I'm just pretty much going to go down project by project. I'll skip over, though, the annual street resurfacing project since you got a fairly extensive presentation on that today. Plymouth Road capital maintenance, this is milling and repaving scheduled for the spring, summer of 2020. South Industrial concrete pavement repairs is summer of 2020. Fuller Court Nixon Traver Sidewalk Project is filling sidewalk gaps on Fuller Court, Nixon, and Traver. Public meeting was held on December 11th, and this project is expected to go in late summer 2020. Jackson Avenue and Washtenaw Avenue Sidewalk Gap Project, again, filling of sidewalk gaps on Jackson Avenue and Washington Avenue Service Drive. There is a public meeting scheduled for January 23rd at 7 p.m. at City Hall. And then other sidewalk gap work is identified there as well on page 2. So you have Stimson, 2 segments of Barton, Boardwalk Drive, and Hollywood Drive, some of which are part of other projects such as resurfacing. We have an initial list of new rectangular rapid flashing beacon installations, RRFBs. These include 3 locations along South Industrial, 2 along Huron Parkway, and we're actually going to probably identify some more as well. But these are the ones that are kind of already in the works, as it were. And they do include the positive contrast lighting as well. Road diets, we've been reporting on this one, but just wanted to keep it on your radar that South Industrial and West Oakbrook Drive were the ones that we presented to you last year that were deemed kind of technically feasible. And we are actively working on the engagement strategy on both of those projects currently. Scioto Church, this is a resurfacing project. There was a there will be a public meeting on January 29th at Lawton Elementary School. The People Friendly Streets Initiative by DDA, First and Ashley is going to be their main focus for next year. So the final design is out on the streets for bid, and that project is expected to start in spring of 2020. There's also some new language about another round of people-friendly streets to expand the protected bikeway network, address utility and maintenance needs, advance carbon neutrality and Vision Zero, and focus on infrastructure improvements. And a request for qualifications was issued, I believe, just last week, and responses are due in February. Lower Town Mobility Study, the road safety audits are going to commence later this month or early next month, so that'll be kind of a first deliverable that comes out of that. For the Office of Sustainability and Innovation, there's a lot of new language related to the carbon neutrality initiative at the city that City Council passed back in November. So there are some technical advisory committees. There's a mobility technical advisory committee specifically that is working on the strategies that are then going to be vetted through the whole process. There's a new website that's identified there. And there are forums being held just about every month. The one for mobility is going to be held in February 13th. And the big reveal is Linda Diane will be one of the presenters at that mobility forum. So mark it on your calendars, December 13th at the Downtown Library. And then the last piece of information that's shared with you is the transportation plan update. There is a mobility fact book. I think we've revealed pieces of this, but it's all been kind of stitched together and is available online now at the link provided. And the next round of advisory committee meetings is going to be held on February 20th. So the Community Advisory Committee is February 20th from 9 to 11 here at City Hall. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Sure, just the Barton sidewalk gap. I try to stay on top of things, and I either haven't been paying enough attention to Barton or don't understand exactly what's going on, but it seems that it might be contentious. Is there sort of a background of where we're at right now, and does this body need to make a recommendation, or?
There is a resolution being presented to council on Monday night. Tuesday night, thank you. Related to the removal of parking. There's a city rule that if we remove more than a block of parking, it has to be approved by city council. Part of the design is a recommendation of bike lanes along Barton Drive, and in order to accommodate that, it would require the removal of the parking. So that seems to be the contentious piece, or at least some of the, I shouldn't say necessarily contentious, but that seems to be the discussions that I'm seeing right now. People who are for or against seem to be focused on parking versus the on-street bike lanes.
So a quick follow-up, if council says, no, we're not going to take away the parking, does the project otherwise go through sidewalks and all of that?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that, okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? All right, it seems like a very reasonable format. So far, so. Back to the agenda. The next item is the traffic calming update.
Right, so there was a memo that was provided in your communication items, and that is informational. It's letting council know that we have posted the updated guidebook that correlates with the traffic calming program that was updated about a year ago. All the program materials got cleaned up. It took a while. We tested the new program with a couple of different project areas to see how it was going, and we've now posted the updated guidebook, and there are a couple of bullet points there identifying language clarifications that are slight differences than what was provided with the original program update materials, but we believe will maintain the integrity and intent, but provide clearer language.
Any comments or questions about traffic calming changes? Go ahead.
Just real quick, as a member of that committee, and we spent a lot of time on it, thank you very much for that. It was great to see that finalized, you know, and there, and yes, so thank you. Thank you for doing that.
All right, anything else? I feel like I want to slow us down in some ways now, so. It just happened. Liaison reports. Reports from those people who represent particular groups, and we were wondering, in particular, Tim, if the disability group spoke about the white cane law. We were waiting for that information.
Seems like there still hasn't been like an official action on the white cane law. It's been discussed, but I don't know. I feel like, yeah, but it's kind of slipped through the cracks a little. But also, they did discuss the HB 4738. They still haven't decided, like, as far as making a statement on it. We may do that next week. I guess some people on there weren't necessarily familiar with the existing crosswalk law and how it differs. So I think we're going to review both of them and try to come up with something at the next meeting.
Okay. Well, hopefully our recommendation to city council will be helpful, and you could share that with them.
Okay.
Other liaisons? Any reports or information for those who?
Very, very briefly, the Micromobility Committee is finally getting the band back together again. We'll be having a meeting on January 31st at 11 a.m. In the second floor workroom, and that's a public meeting, so anyone can come and talk about scooters.
All right. And autonomous bicycles?
Yes, and little robot delivery things. I saw one yesterday, it's really cute.
Work that into the language. If it's cute, then it gets to. There we go. That's a good policy. Any other reports from commission members? Yes.
I talked briefly with Chair before the meeting. There's an item on the council agenda that for Tuesday night that normally we would come through the Transportation Commission first, but there's some time constraints. It involves the city's support for a mobility corridor from Detroit through to Ann Arbor. It's very, details remain to be worked out. We were asked to get a resolution of support from council so that the governor could have that when she gave her State of the State address. So due to the time constraints and the fact that details are still very much a work in progress, I just wanted to inform the commissioners that as that develops, it'll certainly come back for discussion for the Transportation Commission. Right now, I think it's more a statement of goodwill. There's really no resources dedicated to it, but it will develop over the next couple months, and it's something that I think everyone will find to be extremely exciting as it gets developed.
Other commission messages? Yes.
So I have two thank you shout-outs to give, and then one sort of inspiring, we have more to do. And I'm going to start with the more to do, because the last thing I'm going to say is the most important to me. Today, the more improvement, we need to get better. I chose to take the bus today instead of riding my bike because it was cold and wet, and I decided not to drive, even though driving takes me 22 minutes to get here. Biking takes 32 minutes to get here. My bus was supposed to be 43 minutes to get here, and it was an hour and 25 minutes. So there's more work to be done. We will never get people on transit if they can't trust the schedule. So that's the inspiring, there's more work to do. I hope we figure it out. Big thank you to those who wrote the annual report. I assume Kayla had a hand in that, as well as Linda Diane. But if not Kayla, please pass it on to others who put it together. I think it's a fabulous annual report. I very much appreciate the time that people took to it.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to Nani Wolf, who did the majority of pulling it together.
Great, thank you. And then the last thing to say is that, Linda Diane, thank you so much for leading this for the last 3 years. You've been inspiring and a mentor, and I just wanted to say officially, thank you so much for your service.
My pleasure. Kathy?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Linda Diane, not only for chairing this commission, but the non-motorized transportation, I think it was called a committee.
The Pedestrian Safety and Access.
Oh,
Committee,
okay.
yeah.
As well as many years of advocacy before that, and I do have a gift for you that I'll give you off camera, unless you'd like it now.
I can wait.
Okay.
And I feel very confident of turning things over to Molly, and even though she hasn't read Robert's rules cover to cover.
I will by our next meeting, I promise.
Well, it's really exciting reading. I know I've read it twice. But, yeah, we're up and running quite well. And as I mentioned in the notes, I think it's because of the fabulous people on the commission as well as the staff. And somehow there was a rumor that I'm resigning from the commission itself, and that's absolutely not true. Certainly, there was a bit of a fight to get here, and I'm staying. I'll just be sitting someplace else. So thanks. Any other comments from commissioners? All right. Then we can move into the next agenda items. And the agenda item that Clark mentioned about is actually something that Molly had already brought up to put into the work plan. So that is, we're on top of it. Other items for the next meeting or future meetings? Yes.
I'd like to have a discussion about streetlights, not only crosswalks without streetlights, but the reporting of streetlight outages. It seems like every meeting that I go to, people are talking about streetlights now. And I think it's a major safety issue.
Okay, so if we can put that in the form of a action item of some sort, that would be the most helpful thing.
We did just have a presentation on streetlights a couple months ago.
Yeah, I think it might have been several, but we did have one in the last year.
Yes.
It's my knowledge that the crosswalk design guidelines do not include streetlights in the guidelines, and so I guess my action item would be that we include lighting, positive contrast lighting, in our crosswalk design guidelines That would be my action item, and get an update on streetlight conditions.
Okay, so Kayla can work with that. Other, yes, Tim?
I know there was some mention, like, yeah, I'm just wondering if we're going to get like an update from RTA or at all, because I know there's been a lot of stuff going on, like the stuff that Clark mentioned about the Ann Arbor to Detroit, and there's also some work as to finding a way to fund like an alternative way, because Macomb doesn't want to move forward with another vote like they did in 2016, so they're trying to find a legislative means to exclude Macomb and move forward, and thinking that should be coming up at some point.
Is that on the agenda already, or?
I believe we have that on the work plan as a future agenda item, waiting to learn more about the timing and when will be the appropriate time that there's enough information to have the right discussion, but it is tracked as one that the commission said they were interested in.
Right. Any other agenda items, future?
Oh, I'd also mention, yeah, just wanted to add AAATA to the list as well. I think they're on the list as future things, but I know they had talked about their long-range plan, and we're gonna come back, and they also are involved somewhat in this Ann Arbor to Detroit service, so.
Well, we'll at least wait until they have a representative again. But keep in
Yeah,
contact.
that's correct. We do have the RIDE long-range plan, the RIDE Detroit Ann Arbor connector. Those are both listed as potential future agenda items. And when we reached out to the CEO, to Matt Carpenter, about scheduling them for a specific month, we weren't able to get the go-ahead to do that at this point. So we are still in touch with the RIDE about timing for those items.
Great. Speak now, or you can speak later.
And I can share what's on the February work plan.
Okay?
We are scheduled to have a discussion about committee work, so discussing the general needs for future committee work. That was a request from the Transportation Commission when we talked about the work plan. We also have the A20 carbon budget analysis, so this is follow-up. Missy Stoltz presented at the December meeting and mentioned the budget analysis work to come, and you all had requested seeing that when it was ready. So that's anticipated for February, as well as an update on the comprehensive transportation plan. So the consultant team will be back in town and plans to attend the commission and provide an update, and Ann Arbor Station as well. That's currently planned, and I look to Raymond to see if he had any nod of whether that's on track, but we'll see.
It's been submitted to Federal Railroad Administration, so we're waiting to hear back from them officially.
And this is a little bit out of order, but I was requested to attend a meeting Friday morning, and it was a bit mysterious to me about what it was, but it turns out it's to discuss the commission to work with future A20 projects, and I'm still a little bit unsure about what this is, but we'll transmit all the information to Molly that I find out. So I think that they're following up on their presentation, but we'll see what that's about. Okay, if there are no other agenda items, the next meeting will be Wednesday, February 19th, 7 PM in the second floor City Council chambers at Larkham City Hall, where we are right now. And if there are no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you.